Tucked away in the vast, blinding dunes of White Sands National Park, there's an eerie stillness that settles in as the sun dips below the horizon. In a park shaped by shifting sands and silence, it's easy to wonder if something unseen is moving just beyond the next ridge. Thanks for joining us for this month's installment of Haunted Parks. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everyone. My name is Elise, and I'm your host. And I just want to say we are going to do one more New Mexico themed episode for this month because I spent a lot of time in New Mexico and I miss living there. It's a beautiful, very, very pretty state, and it's severely underrated. Now, I I wanna know from you guys if you are big hikers, if you hike with trekking poles or not, because I did a pretty gnarly hike last Friday, and, wow, my knees and my legs and my calves, it was very, very steep and very rocky, and I hike a lot, but for some reason, that hike really was hard for me, I think because of how steep it was. And I'm like, "Oh, shit. Do I need to start hiking with trekking poles?" Now, I've never hiked with trekking poles before because, the person that really got me into hiking and backpacking said he was kind of an elitist. He said, they were not they're for pansies, basically, and that, you should be able to walk with your own 2 feet, without poles. So, I've never used them, but I'm thinking when I do steep trails, it might be useful, and I read online and everybody and things online are like, "No, it's really good to take pressure off your joints." So, I don't know if turning 30 just magically made my joints stop working, but man, Saturday and today, I'm like, "Oh, I can barely walk." So, it's super fun. So, let's get on with it. I'm going on a backpacking trip this week, so I'm super excited. And I hope that you're able to get out and stay safe. There have been a lot of search and rescues already just here in Salt Lake County. And I mean, a ton, like a ton, way more than I thought. So just be safe, be smart, pack enough water, pack electrolytes, salty snacks, pack more than what you think you'll need because you really don't know what's going to happen out on the trail and wear a life jacket if you're doing any sort of boating. So, let's get into it. Let's talk about White Sands National Park. Now, this is a national park that I have been to several times. And the first two times that I visited, it wasn't a national park yet. It was still just as a national monument. And it's beautiful, but I love the reviews, the negative reviews for this park because I find them hilarious. So, the first one says, if you're going to close the park for weather, update the website before people spend hours driving out there. So, like, that one's not funny, but they get just more unhinged as we go. The main reason we came to see the fossilized footprints, not pictures of them. The footprints are closed indefinitely. Wasted a while hole, maybe 7-hour trip for something I could see online. The point of these places is to get out in nature and experience it in real life. My entire trip ruined by disappointment. I think your trip could have been saved if you would have done some Googling. The next one. Taking one look at the place, I fully expected to see Lawrence of Arabia leading a convoy of camels across the dunes, but was disappointed. They tell you to bring a gallon, in all caps, of water, and that is no joke because the air is so dry it literally sucks moisture out when you breathe. Despite the scorching sun, the sand was freakishly cool enough to walk on barefoot, which is apparently some science thing here. Parking was ample, so I just thought that one was funny. Can confirm excuse me, can confirm I've hiked in white sands, without shoes, and the sand can be super, super cold, like, almost unbearably cold on your feet. The next review says, "Literally just sand, like, why?" Question mark. The next review, "It's not even sand." The next review, "I dislike sand greatly." The next review, "Not enough sand." And then the last review, sand everywhere. Um, I just think it's so funny, honestly. It just really cracks me up that people go to see White Sands National Park and then complain about the sand. But, I've traveled with someone like that, and there will be something negative to say about any place you go if you can find something. So let's talk a little bit about White Sands National Park. Now, I did an episode on this national park a while back, so I'm not gonna go into a lot of specifics, um, but it is located in New Mexico, and it's completely surrounded by the White Sands Missile Range. It covers over 145,000 acres. One no, 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 sorry, I cannot read. 145,000 acres, and it's in the Tularosa Basin, and it's basically a field of white sand dunes composed of gypsum crystals. Now, I have hiked in White Sands, and I have hiked in the Lincoln National Forest that is above White Sands, and there are some really cool trails that you can do in this beautiful, beautiful green, lush national forest, and you look down in the valley and you can see white sands. It's, like, tiny, just like a white little blip, but you can see it, and it's crazy. It puts it into perspective how large this basin is because, you're several thousand feet up and you can still see white sands, and it's tiny, but when you're in white sands, it, of course, seems endless. So if you haven't been to White Sands National Park, I highly suggest you go. Definitely not in the summer, it gets too hot, but in the shoulder season is recommended. I went one time in November and I camped. Perfect weather for camping in a tent. And then again in January, and it was actually really nice. So I recommend November, October. Now, this gypsum doomed field is the largest of its kind on Earth, with a depth of about 30 feet or 9.1 meters, dunes as tall as 60 feet or 18 meters, and about 4.5 billion short tons or 4.1 billion metric tons of gypsum sand. It is huge. White Sands National Park was originally designated White Sands National Monument on January 18th, 1933, by President Herbert Hoover. Since 1941, the park has been completely surrounded by the military installations of White Sands Missile Range and the Holloman Air Force Base. It was redesignated as a national park by Congress and signed into law by President Donald Trump on December 20th, 2019. It is the most visited national park site in New Mexico, with about 600,000 visitors each year. The park features a drive from the visitor center to the heart of the dunes, picnic areas, backcountry campground in the dune field, marked hiking trails, and sledding on the dunes. Ranger guided orientation and nature walks occur at various times and months throughout the year. So, approximately 12,000 years ago, the land within the Tularosa Basin featured large lakes, streams, grasslands, and ice age mammals. As the climate warmed, rain and snowmelt dissolved gypsum from the surrounding mountains and carried it into the basin. Further warming and drying caused the lakes to evaporate and form selenite, cannot talk, crystals. Strong winds then broke up the crystals and transported them eastward. A similar process continues to produce gypsum sand crystals today. So, one of the reviews that I read was about footprints. And in case you didn't see it, I think it was either last year or the year before, the potentially oldest known human footprints in North America were found at White Sands by researchers who identified approximately 60 fossilized footprints buried in layers of gypsum soil on the large playa in the Tularosa Basin. So they said like these are the oldest they've ever found in North America. So very interesting, and I'm not surprised that they were found in New Mexico by any means. Another cool fact about this national park is that between 1969 and 1977, 95 oryx were released within the Missile Range and adjacent areas of the Tularosa Basin by the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish for hunting purposes. If you don't know what that is, you should look it up. They're native to Africa and like you've seen them before. You just might not know the name. So the oryx, having no natural predators, entered the park and competed with native species for forage. Thousands of oryx reside on the Missile Range presently, though annual hunts have occurred since 1974 to help control and stabilize the population. The National Park Service, concerned about the negative effects on native plants and animals within the park, erected a 67-mile or 108-kilometer boundary fence in 1996 to prevent the oryx from entering. So if you wanna hunt this really cool looking, kind of like an antelope thing, you could go to New Mexico and do it in the desert. Seems crazy, but they are still around the Missile Range. So, about the weather here, it's super hot, and the warmest months are April through October. And the average high temperatures reaches like 79 degrees Fahrenheit or 26 degrees Celsius, and it can get up to 111 degrees Fahrenheit or 44 degrees Celsius. Now, the cooler months are November through March, when the average low temperature is about 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. So, we have severe weather extremes here. Now, March and July are the two busiest months with more than 60,000 visitors each, or about 2,000 visitors per day, while November through February have the fewest visitors with less than 30,000 per month, or like fewer than 1,000 per day. I recommend going in the shoulder season. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog walking around, because it is beautiful and the weather is much, much better. Okay, so because I already went over White Sands National Park in a previous episode, I'm going to skip all the safety things because we're not concerned about safety today. We are concerned about why it's haunted. So, a lot of people have died here because of heat related illnesses and exposure. But I want to start with the early 1500s. There are a lot of old legends that surround White Sands, and since the 1500s, it's said to be haunted. Okay, so in the early 1500s, a great battle was fought at the edge of White Sands, what's now White Sands National Park, but back then it was just, the White Desert. A Spanish conquistador named Hernando de Luna and his men, while in search of the seven cities of Cibola and Gran Quivia, were attacked by a band of Apache warriors. Sorry for my pronunciations. Now, they were defeated and the survivors fled south to Mexico City. Now, having been severely injured in the attack, Armando de Luna disappeared into the dunes, never to be seen again. Now, what do I think happened? I think he died from exposure, or heat-related things, but legend has it that the brave conquistador's fiancée set out to find him amongst the sprawling white dunes. Her ghost is told to sometimes be seen haunting the lonely desert. Pava Blanca is what she's referred to, and it's believed to be seen wandering through the sands just after sunset as the evening breeze works its way over the empty dunes. Now, I found this interesting. The White Sands National Park used to have a like what do you call it? A web link website. It's like on their website, like a page about this, and it goes pretty into detail. However, they have since removed that, and I could only find a PDF version of it, which I will link in the show notes. But it goes into like a more like very detailed account on this legend, and I think it's really a beautiful story. This happened This happened in the 1500s, but it was published in the New York Times on June 22nd, 1941. And so the author actually gives one of the only written accounts of this legend. And the article is called Here Manuela's Ghost Lingers. And so if you are interested in reading this, it is beautiful. I think it's heartbreaking, but I also think it's very interesting as well. It's really sad because the woman's name was Manuela, and when Hernando, told her, "Hey, I have to go out to do this," he said, "When the Padres have built a church in our city to the north, we will be the first to ask their blessing, and there we will take our nuptial vows." So it's really sad because they were about to get married, and she's apparently seen in her wedding dress across the dunes. Now, like I said, it's believed that the ghost of Manuela still haunts the dunes of the White Sands, specifically after sunset. Now, some people claim her ghost is merely a gentle wind, like whipping up like wraith-like eddies of sand over the hushed and over the desert, when it's quiet outside and you're just looking and you think you might have seen something, but you're not sure. It's just a really, sad it's just a really sad legend, but apparently many people have seen her. So, her name's Manuela, but her ghost name is Pava Blanca, and she's searching for her lost lover, Hernando. Now, this broader area around White Sands is known for other spooky occurrences, including the long unsolved disappearance of Albert Fountain and his son in 1896. So, Albert was a colonel, and he was also an American attorney who served in the Texas Senate and the New Mexico House of Representatives. He was born October 23rd, 1838 and disappeared February 1st, 1896. So here's a little bit about his life and why he probably went missing. And I'm using that term in air quotes. I don't think he went missing. In August 1861, during the American Civil War, Albert enlisted in the Company E of the 1st California Infantry Regime of the Union Army, and he was elected first sergeant of his company. He took part in 1862 and the recapture of New Mexico territory as a member of the California Column. So he had a long, decorated military past, and in October 1862, he married Mariana Perez of Mesia. They became the parents of four sons and two daughters. He was later commissioned as a second lieutenant and was discharged on August 31st, 1864. He almost immediately joined the New Mexico Volunteers because of the ongoing Indian Wars. And in June 1865, he was seriously wounded while pursuing hostile Apaches. I'm not going to talk on that. I wasn't around when that was happening, but basically, he's fighting Apaches and the other indigenous peoples for the land, which was wrong. He spent a night trapped under his dead horse with a bullet in his thigh, an arrow in his forearm, and another arrow in his shoulder. On his recovery, Albert was discharged. Because of medical issues. And honestly, if that doesn't say how much of a freaking badass he was, he literally spent a whole night under his dead horse, shot and with two arrows in him. So he was like a hard ass, okay? So after that all happened, he settled in El Paso, Texas, working for the United States Property Commission, which investigated and disposed of former Confederate property. He was then made the customs collector for the El Paso region, and he was actually became a judge and finally became the assessor and collector of internal revenue for the Western District of Texas. So you've got this man who's fought in the military, he's like made of steel. He has all of this government background in his, belt in his under his belt. I don't know what's wrong with my brain. I am so sorry. So he's, like, kinda well known, right? He's kinda climbed up the ranks, he does a lot, and, in 1870, he became the co-founder of the Church of Saint Clement, the first Protestant church in El Paso. So we want to talk about 1869. He won a seat as a Republican in the Texas Senate, serving in the 12th and 13th Texas legislatures. He was elected as president pro tempore during the second session of the 12th legislature and served as a lieutenant governor ex officio at the same time as the office was vacant. His most notable accomplishment was pushing through the bill that reestablished the Texas Rangers, which had been abolished after the Civil War. Fountain's radical Republican views angered Texas Democrats, and he was challenged to several duels, resulting in his killing of at least one man, Frank Williams. In 1873, he moved from El Paso to Mesilla with his wife and their 5 children. There, he started to practice law, using his fluent Spanish to, his advantage in jury trials. He was appointed assistant district attorney and also served as a probate judge and a deputy court clerk. In 1877, he founded a newspaper, the Mesilla Valley Independent, which was issued in both English and Spanish. He also founded the Mesilla Dramatic Society and the Mesilla Valley Opera House, now the Fountain Theater, both originally operated by his family. So he's kind of a badass, honestly. I think it's really cool. He's a badass. And in his law practice in Mesilla, his most famous client was Billy the Kid. He lost the 1881 case, and Billy the Kid was convicted of murder despite the evidence, though he escaped from jail. In 1888, Albert was elected to the New Mexico territorial legislature, defeating his enemy Albert Bacon Fall. Everyone's named Albert. So, at the time of Albert's disappearance, he was investigating and prosecuting suspected cattle rustlers, specifically Oliver M. Lee, and he again found himself at odds with Fall, who was Lee's attorney. So, he's got this bad blood, this bad relationship with these people that he's trying to prosecute, and it turns ugly on February 1st, 1896. Albert Fountain and his 8-year-old son Henry disappeared near White Sands on their way home to Mesilla. They were returning from Lincoln, where Fountain had been assisting the prosecution in bringing charges against Oliver Lee and William McNew. All that was found at the site of the disappearance were Fountain's buckboard wagon, several empty cartridge cases, his papers, and 2 pools of blood. The only sign of Henry was a blood soaked handkerchief with 2 powder blackened coins, the handkerchief still carefully knotted in one corner. Missing were Albert's and Henry's bodies, a blanket, a quilt, and Albert's Winchester rifle. So it looks like someone murdered them. That's what I would say. Some speculated that outlaw Tom Blackjack Ketchum and his gang were involved. Most, however, were convinced that the disappearances could be attributed to Oliver Lee, a noted rancher, land developer, and part-time deputy U.S. Marshal. So he's crooked. Lee's employees, McNew and Jim Gilliland, were also suspected of involvement. So, um, nothing ever really happened, basically. Um, they they surrendered, people this is the Wild West. They got hunted down and had a gunfight and everything. But they surrendered and then they were defended by Fall, which was the other Albert that was an attorney, and they were acquitted due to like a lack of evidence. Fountain was a powerful rival to landowners Fall and Lee. Fall was known to hate Fountain, or, Albert, that's Fountain's his last name, as a political rival, just as Albert hated Fall. Fall's association with Lee began when he had defended Lee in a criminal case. So it's really messy. And the bodies of Albert and Henry were never ever found, and the prosecution was greatly hampered. So everybody knows that these 2 or 3 men murdered Albert Fountain and his son, but there's no evidence to say that they did or where their bodies are. No one was ever charged with the murder of Albert Fountain. Lee and his employees, McNew and Gilland, were tried for the murder of Henry Fountain. Charges were also never filed for the death of Deputy Sheriff Carney, which they murdered in that gunfight near Alamogordo. There are memorials to both Albert Fountain and his son in the Masonic Cemetery in Las Cruces, though their actual burial site still remains a mystery. Another cool thing, Albert Fountain's disappearance was dramatized in the 2013 film Among the Dust of Thieves. So there, there's multiple people that have gone missing. This is like a historical disappearance, and never found, probably murdered, but still, I'm like, where are their bodies? And is it possible that now in today's age, with people outside exploring more, lands changing hands, are their bodies ever going to be discovered? I mean, they would likely be just bones by now, but I find that disappearance extremely interesting. And you can't talk about New Mexico without talking about aliens. So, the Holloman Air Force Base is the site of a reported alien abduction and mutilation in 1957. According to UFO lore, in March 1957, or sometimes 1956 in some retellings, Sergeant Jonathan P. Lovett and Major William Cunningham were scouring the desert for rock debris at White Sands Missile Range near the Air Force Base. Cunningham allegedly watched in horror as a serpentine metallic arm grabbed Lovett and pulled him into a hovering silver UFO. After a 3-day search, Lovett's nude body was allegedly recovered 10 miles away. His corpse was said to be severely mutilated, his tongue and eyes removed, his genitals and anus extracted with precise surgical skill, with no vascular collapse or blood left in the body. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, it might be because that's kind of what happens during cattle mutilations. Um, it's very interesting, and I had never heard of this UFO abduction or this alien abduction and mutilation until I started researching white sands. So this would be a very interesting. I'd love to see an episode of this on Unsolved Mysteries or something, because it had to do with two servicemen who were looking for rocket, sorry, I said rock before, but I meant rocket. So they're out looking for rocket debris in the White Sands Missile Range near Holloman Air Force Base, and one witnesses the other get pulled up into a UFO, and then days later, he's found severely mutilated and no blood left in his body. Very, very interesting. And New Mexico is also famous because of Roswell. And if you ever go, I highly suggest going to the UFO museum in Roswell. I love Roswell. It's cute, it's kitschy, and I totally believe aliens are out there. So I liked going to the UFO museum. And actually, I think I visited when I was like freshly 16. And I thought I was so cool. I bought a bumper sticker to put on my first ever car. It was like a 1996 Mazda Miata. And the bumper sticker said, "Buckle up. It makes it harder for aliens to suck you out of your car," or something like that. So it's like, haha, safety, but also aliens. So that's a little aside. So White Sands, yeah, historical disappearances, lots of deaths, UFO sightings, just some weird shit goes on at White Sands. And I'm sure that if camping overnight if you camped overnight in the dunes, and if you I'm sure you would see some weird shit up in the sky, okay? If you've never been, there's, like, no light pollution, and it gets so dark, so, so, so dark at night. So I'm sure if you ever camped over in the dunes, you would see some weird shit at night in the sky. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. It's the last one based in New Mexico for a while. You guys got almost a full month of New Mexico stories, and I will see you next week. White Sands looks otherworldly, and some parts of it just might be. From strange disappearances, deaths, UFOs, and haunted dunes, it's worth a visit, especially if you are into the paranormal. As always, recreate responsibly and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. You can also join us on Patreon for early and ad-free content. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.